Hi, I'm Tony Bramley. I've been a professional photographer for over 25 years. I help people just like you with my one-to-one training and group workshops. I provide judging for camera clubs and also, like you, shoot just for fun. Join me as I pass on a few wise words and probably some stupid ones too in a creative world called photography. We're going to do a full edit of this image here and just show you just some of the techniques to use, particularly getting rid of reflections here, and also some work in Photoshop, really looking at how to get rid of some other things like shadows and other bits and pieces, some different cloning as well. This is the original image here, so it's shot on a workshop and I was shooting through shoulders, so I didn't get the best angle, but really it's not me getting the best angles on my workshops but other people, for that reason it's quite good to use this and see what can be done. And this is the initial edit back here on this one, and then into Photoshop was to get rid of these bits here, sort this shadow out here, and the last couple of reflections really within this area here. So let's go over to the original here and let's just do an initial edit in Lightroom. A lot of the time I use Adobe Camera Raw, but they are more or less the same these days, so I thought I'd do this one in Lightroom and then we'll finish off in Photoshop because it needs to be done really in Photoshop. So with the image, first of all, let's sort out verticals and the framing on this. So coming over to transform, I'm going to go for guided, and I want this to be the edge of the image, so we'll just pop some guides in here and just get that where you roughly need it to be, and then the same over here. And I want this to be parallel with the bottom of the image, this bit of pavement here, so we'll pop another guide in there. So it's just coming along that edge there. And this is going to be the important top line for me as well. And when this technique is used, sometimes you do get a change in aspect, so we'll just take a look at that aspect. I'm just really looking at Amy here and making sure that we've not kind of squashed her down too much. And I think about there should work really. So let's go over to the crop tool. And like I said, we're going to have this edge here. I think I'm just going to come into about there and then make that roughly the same sort of thickness at the top there. And then take a look at the other two edges, which is going to come in onto that left side, and then the pavement, and you can see where we've straightened that up. So that's going to be the crop. So quite a harsh crop for me, but like I said, I was shooting over shoulders, and really this is a good thing to demo. So let's come out of the crop tool there, just increase the size a little bit with the zoom, and then take a basic look at the actual changes we need to make here with tones, etc. So overall it's pretty good. I'm just having a look at the shadow area here. I will take the shadows down a little bit purely because of this, but I'm going to do that with a brush. I'll bring these up a little bit here on these shadows here, and everything else I think is pretty good. Maybe tone this down a little bit down here, but I think I'll probably do that once I've worked on these areas here in Photoshop. So going over to the brush tool, which is over here in the new masking areas, and we're going to go with shadows. I'm going to darken these shadows, so just pick somewhere in there. With the brackets keys, make the brush just a little bit bigger, and we can already, you can see those shadows just been knocked back in there where you've got tiny little highlights coming through. And I quite like a little bit of reflection on this side here with the dress and whatever this is here, so we'll leave that as it is. And yeah, I think that's good enough. And then just with a new mask, go with the brush again. And this time we're going to open up the shadows, and that's going to be on the clothing here. And a little bit on the hair. Yeah, let's just take a look at that. Now, this was shot as a JPEG, again unusual for me, but I just went with one camera with a fixed lens, which was the X100, and I've the ability to actually zoom in a bit closer from a distance, so that's what I was doing, and you have to use JPEGs for that. End of the day, I wouldn't do this for something for me personally. I would have taken one of my other cameras and chosen the right lens, but it makes it light work for me on a workshop, and like I said, I don't need to worry with images like this if I'm losing that sort of fidelity out of the image. And at times I've got to say I sometimes wish I hadn't done that, but you know, I'm not there to shoot for me a lot of the time. It's for the delegates. But as a JPEG, some of the blacks do get kind of blocked up a little bit if we kind of open up the shadows. You know, some of those will not come back, and you can get some strange effects coming into play. So I might take a look at that again in Photoshop with dodging and burning, but we just do what we can there, and even see if we can tease a little bit of detail out there. But you know, from this distance, it still looks a reasonable shot on that. Okay, so let's have a little look at what else is going on here. So that's going to be Photoshop. Some areas here that I think I'll take out in Photoshop as well. I think we'll take some of these vertical lines out, you know, that can actually stop movement from left to right. As you hit a vertical line, they're quite strong things in your images here. Originally I didn't take this line out. I think that's okay, but you know, sometimes you think, well, yeah, that's a bit annoying as well. Okay, and obviously we need to take these bits out here. So looking at the basics, let's go back on basics here. Exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites and blacks. Yeah, I'm pretty much happy with all of that, I think. I don't need any texture clarity anymore in there, and saturation is fine. It's high contrast light, so we can leave all of that. So I think, looking at that, actually I'll tell you what we will do, we'll just check on these highlights here, see if we can work on those. So let's create a new mask with a brush, and we'll possibly use a combination of highlights and exposure, but let's just see what highlights can do. Going a little bit closer using the Control or Command and plus key, and let's just open up with the brackets, a brush, and we'll just tone those highlights down just a little bit there. And you can see I've just overbrushed a little bit there, but we'll go back and correct that. Yeah, so let's just see what's going on with that. Yeah, I'm going to take it all the way back, I think. Maybe a little bit of negative exposure, but you can see what's going to happen. There's going to be some kind of ghosting around there as well. Maybe about there. And if we use the Alt key, and that would change that to a negative brush, so we can just fix where I've overbrushed things a little bit there. There's a little bit of natural shadow there, and it doesn't look too bad actually. And I'm just going to take a look at that flow and bring that up just a bit more. Yeah, that's just helping a touch more there. So yeah, I think that's a bit more of a natural shadow coming there, and I think that's acceptable. We'll get away with it here because of what's going on behind. So let's zoom out. Let's come out of mask first, and then zoom out. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, so let's right click on the image and edit in Photoshop. And we'll do with adjustments. So it looks like I haven't updated Camera Raw, but let's carry on anyway. We'll render using Lightroom, and I must update Camera Raw. Just didn't realise that's the case there. So let's take a look at that. Just zoom out and pull that out a little bit. Okay, so I think we'll sort this line out along here first of all, and mainly because that's probably the easiest. You can try cloning, you can try going with some of these tools here with the healing brushes and patch tools as well. Let's try spot healing, see if it does a good enough job, and I just tend to use short little strokes and see how it goes. And it's not doing a bad job, it's quite a messy board in some ways. Let's try something else just while we're here, and you can see we'll try some patching. And that can work quite well at times as well. So just again, I use little patches. And I'm going to get rid of those little rivets or whatever they are, painted screws. And with something like this, you can be fairly rough around the edges as long as it's doing a really good job actually. Quite often I'll use this rather than cloning because it just kind of like smooths the edges really well. So you know, doing little pieces like this is time consuming, but generally any sort of cloning that's beyond the norm needs a bit of time, and it's worth spending that time on it. So let's just carry on with these, and I think we've got rid of most of the text apart from here. I'm going to just try and cheat on this bit here and see if this will do it, just because cheating sometimes works, and it doesn't, so just Command or Control Z to undo. We'll take a look at some patch cloning on there. Let's get rid of this one here, I suppose, but that will probably come out in the patch cloning. You can always work on a few more of these little marks if you need to. Let's try and get rid of this vertical while we're here. As I said, you know, it kind of stops the flow of movement from left to right, and I'm quite happy for the flow to go all the way out to the right, because actually this text is so strong, you're never going to leave to the right hand side here, you're always going to come back to the text. So you can see that's done a good job of that there, so we can again do a little bit here. And at the top there we can do some regular cloning and maybe get this one out if we can without interfering too much down there. So that will come out, I think, with some regular cloning. That's going to be patch cloning, and I'll probably do some regular cloning on these rivets. So let's take a look at this area here, and I do have a separate video on patch cloning, but let me show you how I'll work with this, because this is hard to do. Patch cloning, as in Photoshop, really doesn't generally do a good job. It's probably going to prove me wrong now. You can see all of this going on here, so let's undo that. So I do my own manual patch cloning. So coming up to the marquee tool, and I see the size of this here. I really don't want to go for all of this. I'm going to do half at a time, and also there's a gradient going dark to bright here, so I'm going to take this section here is what I'm going to work on. So I'm going to take this area over to the left, and I'm going to copy and paste that with just Command or Control J, and you can see that comes up in the top here in the layer, and with that layer active using the move tool, I'm actually going to move that across. Sometimes I will flip this because it will help just with the gradient joining down here. But the problem with that is then this section becomes darker over here. So this time I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to line that up roughly with this line here. And then we're going to bring in down here a mask. I'm going to press Alt as I click on that, and that will actually invert it. So now all I need to do with the brush, using a white brush because we've got a black layer mask, so we've got a white brush over here. Opacity is 100, but I'm just going to hit 4 on the keyboard, which will take that down to 40%, and leave the flow at 100 because I can build up with opacity. I'm just going to start painting over this shadow, building it up until it disappears. And I think we will go to this line here as well. I'm just clicking and dragging. We'll go a little bit bigger. I'm going to come down a little bit lower as well, but I'm going to come for the right hand side for this. So let's just keep working this until we find the line. There's the line coming through. So just press X on the keyboard will make the brush go to a black, and we can reverse that and just leave that as it is. So come back up to here, going a bit closer, and just pressing those bracket keys to make things a little bit smaller. And we need to click on X again because that's black and I want white. So I'm going to take the opacity up to about 60%, so 6 on the keyboard. Just going to feed all of that away. You can see I've got one of these screws come through as part of my cloning. So let's just see what we can do with 100%, so 0 on the keyboard, and just bring in the original line there. Yeah, so pressing X again to go to a black brush, and I'm just going to clear that. I don't like that. I'm going to go back to where we were on that because it's just doing some strange things on the top there. So X again to reverse that. Just sort this shadow out along the top. Just going to reverse that because it brought up a kind of a shadow there. So I'm fairly happy with that. We'll sort those out afterwards up here. So let's zoom out. I'm going to do exactly the same for this side here. So back to the marquee tool, and then I'm going to go to this side, and I'm going to pick up, I think about here, so that section here. I always take more than I need, so I'm going to go for something like that. Command or Control J, that brings in that layer. Go for move. We're on the correct side of that. Oops, we've got a note come up there. Let's just see what's going on. I've just copied the wrong layer. So, I will leave this in for you because this is the sort of mistakes that even I make because I just get so involved in the picture in front. What I did is when I copied and pasted, I was on this layer here and just did a copy of it. So this is the sort of thing that would come up and just think, oh wow, things working. So just all we're going to do, click on that top one that we made and just press the backspace key to delete it. You said it's not doing it, let's just drag it down there so that's going to delete it. Let's go back to what we want, this original background layer. Here we go, the selection is still there. Now Command and J, there it is. It should work underneath, but you can drag this up onto the top if you want to as well. Okay, let's move it over. So back to where we are, Move Tool. Everything's working as it should do. We want to kind of like move over to about there, roughly line it up. And I want to line it up more with this line this time. So we're going to bring in an inverted mask, so Alt on the keyboard, add layer mask, go with a brush, which is B on the keyboard, but up here on the brush tool, make sure we're on white, and then let's start working on this shadow, and press 4 on the keyboard for 40% opacity, and that's always a bit of a guess, okay, but just work with it and see what happens. I'll go a little bit bigger with this, so that's moving through quite nicely. Just sort some of that out there. That's looking pretty reasonable. We can come back and kind of work on this a little bit more using the normal patch tool, but let's carry on with this. Have a little look down here. All of these rivets will need sorting out, but let's just see what's happening. Say rivets or screws or whatever they are. So I'm going to work on this line here now. You can see that's lining up quite nicely there as well. That's sorted that out. Let's see what happens down here. Now that's as far as we can go, so we'll worry about this one in a little bit. Okay, let's zoom out. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to flatten that. I have a keyboard shortcut which is F8, but if I undo that, and that lives somewhere up here in Layers, Flatten Image. Okay, so that's flattened. and we can work a little bit more on patch tool or cloning. So I'm going to use the patch tool and get rid of that there. Just drag that over. That looks okay. Let's see if we can work a little bit faster with the spot healing tool on some of these rivets or whatever they are. It's not too bad. I'm not going to do all of these, but you'll get the idea on that as well. Yeah, I think I'll leave all of those down there. Let's just sort that out. So it's a little bit darker. I probably missed a bit there, but it's kind of like, sometimes if I see like shadows, I'll just run a line, because that kind of helps to blend in rather than using circles all the time. Sometimes you might just get like something left behind. Just run a line along and it'll kind of like change things accordingly. While we're here, we might as well just sort out the clone tool, which is S on the keyboard, and I'd like to try and sort this out a little bit better. So Alt to pick up that area there, and then we're going to move over and we're going to just kind of like work on that accordingly. Let's get rid of that, and while we're here we might as well use the clone tool and say we'll do that as well. Okay, let's take a look. Right, one of the most difficult bits is something like this area over on the left here, so I'll come back to that. Let's sort this little bit out here, down here. So it looks quite difficult because there's texture with this, kind of like glass in the paving, but you know, this can work fairly easy because we've got other resources here to use. So let's take a look and see. We need to pick up this line, and I don't want to go all the way over here to pick up for cloning because there is a little bit of a darker area here. So for these first little bits here, I'm going to go and pick up, I think, this corner, this glass light here onto there, and just work as we need to there. We'll just bring that in a bit more. So that's looking pretty good. We'll worry about that in a minute because I think we're going to get up, or I'll show you, we'll get a little bit, it gets a bit too light possibly. Well, that's not too bad. Let's play with that so we can work along there. Yeah, it's quite reasonable actually. Maybe just, no, we'll stop there, undo that, we'll come back and maybe sort that out a bit. Okay, so we're going on to this one here, so I'm going to pick up on this piece here. Bring that over to where it roughly needs to be. Let's see if we can carry on. I'm going to be lazy. Yeah, it kind of works because these aren't that even really. We might be a little bit out of line. So let's pick up, I think, this one here. I'm going to come over to here. You can see that's a great way of kind of like getting rid of really annoying shadows. And you've got to remember, this is small detail in the image, so you know, if things are a little bit astray, you won't really notice it much. So while we're here, let's get rid of that. That's quite annoying. Maybe that there. Some of this line work here is not very nice. That's just a little bit dark. You know, it's not that much of a problem, but if you want to do something about that, we'll just pick up the clone tool from here, move up, and you can just like feed in, maybe take the opacity down to 40% and now gradient up a bit, and now get rid of the 100% opacity, get rid of these dots that have kind of started to repeat. So if we zoom out, we can see that shadows really worked quite well in coming out. So while we're working on the clone tool, let's go out and sort out these reflected lights here. So again, staying with the clone tool, S on the keyboard, pressing Alt, and we're going to pick up this black, and then make sure we're on 100% opacity. We're just going to, you know, black's always easy. Do the same over here. just get rid of that. And when it comes to the lettering here, we'll work with a smaller clone brush. Again, Alt, pick up here, start moving in. Same on the top, picking up from there, just moving in. We're going in closer, and now we're going to work with a small brush just to clone the edge here of this lettering. So that's too big, that brush. We're going to pick up the right hand side, so we're coming in lower, pick it up, and then just keep clicking, moving up, until it's gone and out of the way. There's a couple of little bits I've missed up there. Do the same on this one. Just get rid of that down there. Just moving up until it's gone. So that's sorted out those highlights there. I've got a couple of little bits down here. I mean, always at the end, go around and do a little bit of tidying up. You know, if this is a picture you're going to use somewhere, or these little bits here, even again, you know, these lines down here, you might actually want to just take those out, and there. And the same with this here. That looks a little bit odd, which is probably where I was doing some cloning earlier. Okay, so that's all little bits of tidying up. So last bit here, before some final dodging and burning, is this on the left here. So this is a lot more difficult, isn't it? So you try and do that, what I've done with the lettering around here. It can be done, but you've got kind of like a curve. Excuse me. So you know, this really, you've got kind of like getting close to pixel depth on this, and of course you get this kind of like contrast line here. So we need to work with that, and the way to do this is to work with the pen tool. So if we go over to the pen tool, and again, I do have a video on the pen tool. It's a hard one to master. I once sat down and said I'm going to master the pen tool. It took me a few days, but it's worth the investment for when you do this sort of work. But I use the pen tool for a lot of other cutting out as well. So we've got the pen tool, and we want to work from around about here down to here, and then obviously this section here. So I'm going to do this in two areas. So first of all, we're going to do this one. So I'm going to click around about here, and then click and drag to produce a little curve, and then using the Alt key, this little handle here, I'm going to move in the direction the next curve is going to be. I'm going to click and put a curve just on the inside here, and again hold the Alt key and change the direction. This doesn't have to be too exact with this, we can just put our own line in here. So again, Alt key, move the handle round a bit, down to the next curve, Alt key, move the handle round a bit. This is going to be a longer curve, so we can get away this, just no change in direction until about here, and come just inside, pull that curve in, pull it longer, and that will help extend that curve upwards more. And Alt key, push that down, change of direction, and so on. Now I don't need to go any further, so now I'm going to just start coming out really wide, all the way around, then join up there. Go to selection. If you're never sure on the feather radius, pick a radius and then try some cloning and see how it looks, because you can always go to undo, but I'm going to go with 2, which is usually 1 or 2 is all I use, but like I said, you know, I've cropped in a bit on this, and I think 1 won't be enough, so we'll go with 2 pixels. And then if you're not sure, like I say, literally try some cloning and see what happens, because you can always undo it. So if I show you with the stamp tool, we're going to press Alt, come down about here, make sure we're on 100%, and see how that looks. So just moving up. And then if we deselect, which is Command or Control D, see what you think there. And actually the edge isn't looking too bad. I might soften that a little bit, but we'll go with that. I'll tell you what, we'll take it back to 1 and show you. So we'll undo, Command or Control Z, undo again, just undo back to our previous state. Okay, so back to the pen tool selection. Let's go with 1, stamp, pick up for our cloning, see how that looks, deselect. Actually that does look a little bit too sharp there, so go backwards with Command and Control Z, and I'm going to change that back to 2. And I'm cutting in just a little bit too harsh there, so I'm just going to, with the Command or Control key, or we can go to the Move tool, and there we go, which I think is Selection, but let's see, yeah, it's Selection, so let's undo that. We go to Selection. I think we can move that just 1 or 2 pixels that way, and then back to the Clone tool. And again, I'm going to leave in, I choose the Move tool to move that, and that was the wrong one to do. We don't do this all the time. It's not something you do day in and day out. So when you start to do these techniques, you will forget, and you think, well, I know how to move the selection once it's there, and I need to just edge it rather than make a new selection. So you think, yeah, I'm going to use the Move tool. Actually, that's wrong. I've got to go to the Selection tool and then use the arrow keys to move it left and right. So let's get cloning on this. So Alt, and then start working on this. Now I'm only going to work on this edge, because if you do try and do this all the way along, you will see some changes. And again, I'm going up to the top here because the colours are slightly different. And the reason I like this technique with the pen tool is I can be sloppy. I can paint all over this. It doesn't affect it at all. So there is a natural kind of pale line there, but I'm going to just work on this area here, and you can see I've actually started to come in onto the shoulder there. So undo, that's all you've got to do. Reselect up here and get that working. So let's deselect, so Command and Control D, and look, just by shifting that left, you can see how that's made a big difference along the edge and looks really natural. So now we can zoom out a little bit, and let's see what we can do here. I'm going to go back to the patch tool, because that's the lazy way of doing it, and it usually does a reasonable job. Yeah, looking good, isn't it? Okay. And again, sometimes you can do the whole lot and it will come out, and I do try and do that again, just being lazy. But it does a better job like this. And we've got that sorted out. You could turn around and say, yeah, this like little light area that was there, shall we see if it will sort it out? Do a quick job of that. Yeah, that sorts that out. It's a tiny little light patch. Again, this boarding is very much like that. Let's get lazy and see if we can get this in one hit. Yeah, that's pretty good. So we're going to do exactly the same here. Down on here, and go with that pen tool. This one should be a lot easier. There's just one change of direction, a little dink there, so we go from here to there, drag, get that curve, press Alt, change of direction, and I'm going to be a little bit lazy and take that curve just about to there. Just go wide, complete, selection, we know it's 2, stamp tool, S on the keyboard, press Alt to select, and just going to feed that in. Deselect, and it's done. While we're here, I might as well get rid of that annoying little spot down there. Okay, we're just going to go with the stamp tool, cloning in, get rid of that as well. Let's just repeat it. Okay, lots more we could do there with those little bits. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so a little bit of dodging and burning to finish off, but the hard work of the cloning and removing pieces is all done really, and it's a little bit of tidying up. So it's a bit bright, this pavement, and you can go back into Lightroom and do some more dodging and burning. You can go into Adobe Camera Raw if you want to, going up to here. I do have an action for some dodging and burning, which is somewhere here. There we go, dodge and burn using screen and multiply. So make sure you've got a single layer, press play, and this action is available. That's on one of my videos with a download. So let's burn in this pavement, so we will make sure we're on the brush tool. And dodging and burning, I usually go with a very big feathered brush. Okay, so just make sure, looking at here, we've got 0 hardness, so that's good. And we want burn. I'm going to go with about 30%, I think, and just build up, just left and right, clicking, just tone that down a little bit. If you take a look at that, you can see how that just helps take that brightness down there. Okay. I think also, yeah, I think we'll just take that bag down just a touch there, just a little bit while we're there. Okay. With this type of dodging and burning, I can stay on that same layer and just change the brush opacity to actually add and subtract all the time. So if I did that too much, I just swap that over to black and bring that back as I need it. Okay, let's take a look at some dodging. So we're going to brighten up some areas, and let's take a look. I said this hair, as it's a JPEG, I don't think there's going to be anything there, but let's just see if we can pull anything back. You can see the brushwork coming in there, but it's just, that's typical JPEG. There's no detail there at all. So all it does is start to go a murky grey, but actually it kind of like is okay-ish. So we'll leave that. We'll probably bring up some more there. You can see I've just gone over that bright area there, so I need to reverse that. So I'm going to press X on the keyboard, go to black. I just want to darken that back down to as it was originally. We ought to really fix that as well in a moment. Okay, so let's take a look. Yeah, I do not like that hair, so let's make sure we're on back. I'm going to take that back a touch and just leave it as it was. Okay, while we're dodging, okay, make sure we're back on a white brush, so X. I'm going to go about 20%, so 2 on the keyboard, and just going to brighten up the face just a touch there. And you can see that happening just like that. Okay, this maybe is a little bit too much. So I hate JPEGs when it comes to this sort of work. So dodging and burning wise, not too bad. See this kind of gradient here finishes here, so we could see if some burning will work just to even up along there. So just come out on the edge so I can see what's going on with the brush, and we'll see if that works. It might not work too well where it joins, but again, I'm going to go very low opacity 2 on the keyboard. We're on a white brush, and just, yeah, I think that's not working too well actually, so let's just try reversing the brush and feeding that back. Yeah, I'm going to undo all of that. You can see it disappearing up here. There we go. And I will show you right at the end, I think, a clone option on this. So yeah, dodging and burning. You could make this a bit brighter, but be careful, because if you start dodging this to get these whites higher, there may be something in the blacks that comes up. And I'll just show you if I go on to 0. Actually, it's not doing much at all. So and that could be because I'm on black brush. See there? So again, just things aren't happening. Just say, why is that? Is that because it shouldn't be happening, or is there something amiss like the brush? Let's try that again. There we go. That brightens it up. But you can see it brought a few little things up along the bottom there. So I'm going to leave that as it is. I might take a look at that just with a final curve layer. Right. So all done apart from, yeah, let's flatten that. And if you don't want to flatten that, you can always put a snapshot above that, which is Command, Alt, Shift, and E, if I remember rightly. Yes, it is. And then what I can do is take the marquee tool and I'm going to go all the way up to there, copy and paste, which is Command or Control J. We can now move that layer down and make sure it's in line. So I'm just using the arrow keys to line that up, and then with an inverted layer mask, so press Alt, Mask, Brush, make sure we've got a white brush, very low opacity, about 2, and I'm just going to feed that gradient in. See how much better that works to what I was trying to do before. Okay, so another way of just like working with your own kind of manual patch clone tool. Okay, so let's merge that to a snapshot at the top, if that's what you want to do. But once you're there, you can flatten the whole thing if you like. I don't know what I did there, that's because I'm talking. So I'm going to flatten it, which is F8 actually. And we're going to finish just with a little bit of a curves layer. So that's going to kind of brighten up those whites. And that's all I'm looking for really, but I'm going to bring the shadows down like that. And now I'm going to invert that, so Command or Control I. And now with a brush, a white brush on this mask, I can now work on that text. And again, I'm going to go about 80%, and I'm just brightening that up without anything else coming through the blacks. Turn it off and on and you'll see there's a little bit of a punch going on those whites there. Okay, so there we go, start to finish, and let's close that, which will ask me to save. And that's doing that as a TIFF because we've come out of Lightroom. So let's click OK on that. Like I said, you can do some more tidying it up if you wish to on that. And there you go. So let me show you that original back again. And zoom out. And zoom in on that one. So there are those two. I've been talking through this, don't forget, so that always takes me a bit longer, but you can see a fair bit of work going on that one, in particular with cloning, so hopefully you've learned quite a bit on that, and it shows you know that when I'm looking at a picture that I'm shooting out and about, if there are a few things wrong with it, I start to say, right, what can I do in post-production? Can it be done? Yes, okay, let's go ahead and execute it, on the understanding that it's not going to be as shot in camera. So yeah, some interesting, bit of a more advanced cloning for you, and really working on an image to get the best you can out of it. Thanks a lot.